Hey everyone, I'm Victor. I'm the organizer of the Space Situational Awareness panel that we're about to have today. In the past decade and looking forward into the next decade, the number of objects in space is only going to grow. And current space situational awareness systems weren't designed for the number of objects that we're supposed to track today. Today, we've invited some of the leaders working on the future of space situational awareness. I'm super excited to hear what Mark, Eve, and Christine, and Eric have to say about this topic. So with that, I'll hand it off over to Mark, and we'll get the Space Situational Awareness panel started.
Hi, I'm Mark Skinner. Work at the Aerospace Corporation, and was there a comment? No. I'm also was undergrad here, course 8 and 21S. So it's a lot of fun to come back and see my old dorm is all wrapped up in shrouds and they're completely redoing it. Anyway, I wanted to sort of level set everyone here. We could have the slide, please. Thank you. So I've talked about space traffic management, space situational awareness for a long time, and I find that it's helpful to kind of explain what's what, especially if you have an international audience. And I do it by talking about the equities that are involved in space traffic in this thing. So you look at things like, what have we got? Positions, we have RFI, we have missile warning, all these things sort of fit in different places. The core, though, is space situational awareness, and a lot of people said that's foundational. That includes things that are involved in both space traffic management, space traffic coordination, as well as space domain awareness. Space domain awareness is rather easy to define because it was defined by a memo, so we just take that as is. Everything else, we sort of have to piece it together. As I like to say, this is not the periodic table of the elements where everything is neatly arranged by atomic number. There is some slop back and forth. You can see where things are. Reasonable people can disagree on where they might be on this chart. But I think we've worked on this long enough that we've kind of come to some common consensus on this. As we go to the left, we go more towards the realm of military, national security, answering questions like intent and understanding control. As we go towards the right, we get more in the realm of the civil, the commercial, safety, innovation, and transparency. So I hope that helps you look at this. This is publicly released. You're welcome to it. And before I get off the stage with this, I just want to say, since this is a student-run conference, if anyone is interested in being an intern, a graduate student intern at the Aerospace Corporation, too late for the summer, but contact me. We'll see if we can set something up for next year. One of your cohort, Miles Lifson, has joined our team, and that's just been wonderful. So we're always on the lookout for good graduate students that can jump in with that. So let's go back to the original chart, and we'll get into the audience or the panel stuff here. So as I'm going to ask you all a question. The same question. Please introduce yourself at the start, and then we'll move along here. So the first question, so commercial SSA, how important of a business is it these days? Is there a market? Please expand. So Christine, you started off.
Sure. My name is Christine Joseph. I'm a policy advisor in the Office of Space Commerce. For those who aren't aware what the office is, it sits inside of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, which is inside of the U.S. Department of Commerce. So the office has actually been around for decades, focused on commercial space advocacy, helping companies navigate the regulatory system within the U.S. government for commercial space, and then has recently expanded to bring on additional functions around licensing and regulations for remote sensing. If you want to take a picture of the Earth from space and you're in U.S. jurisdiction, you actually need a license from our office. And then recently working on the TRACS program, the Traffic Coordination System for Space, which is the civil SSA capability that we're building up. And I'll explain a little bit more later on. In terms of commercial SSA, though, one of the reasons that Department of Commerce is actually building a civil SSA system is because we are going to be leveraging data and software services from commercial SSA companies in order to build up this system. So it's going to be a blend of government and commercial capabilities. And that's really just foundational to make it work. to both foster a commercial marketplace and also provide safety services so satellite operators can operate safely in space.
Eve?
Hi, I'm Eve Ruff. I'm a guidance, navigation, and control engineer at True Anomaly. We're a deep tech defense and space startup working on creating software and hardware in order to maintain safe space security and sustainability. So as far as why we think SSA is important is, we rely on space every day for so many different things: communications, connectivity, navigation, missile detection, weather detection, all those things on the chart Mark showed earlier, which was so helpful. And these things are all important for maintaining a safe, secure, and transparent life here on Earth. So we think it's crucial that they are working every day. Everything in space is working well every day, but it's a very congested domain, right? I think the number is that there's 10,000 active satellites and 3,000 inactive satellites, and 84% of them are all in LEO. So it's very important that those are all coordinating together and working properly in order to maintain day-to-day operations. And then furthermore, True Anomaly, we are a little bit more on the SDA side of things. So not only do we see that it's super crucial to know where everything is in space, but also the capabilities of everything in space. And in doing so, I think we allow for a level playing field, establishing international rules-based order, and allowing strategic planning for our allies and for the United States DoD. As far as the market, obviously, governmental will be huge for that. We want to have SDA as a way of maintaining United States space superiority and allow for just making sure everyone is on the same page and we know what's going on in space. But there also is a huge commercial market, which I feel like is very important to mention as well. Basically, anyone who would want eyes in space and a greater understanding of what their satellite looks like or someone else's satellite looks like, or have some sort of anomaly resolution or augmentation to government services would want better SSA and SDA data.
Awesome.
Eric.
Hey, my name's Eric Ingram. I am founder, chairman, and chief strategy officer for Scout Space. We're a company that develops in-space vision capabilities to look at stuff in space from space, to support things everywhere from proximity operations and near-field activities, all the way to long-range space domain awareness and non-resolved imaging, and intend to operate everywhere from LEO to cislunar and maybe beyond eventually, and have different payload sizes according to those set missions. The commercial market is nascent at best for SDA and in-space vision capabilities, but they are an enabler for the governmental interest and for the structure we need to build up to operate safely in space, as we want to take it from being the Wild West in space to being the moderate Midwest in space. Like, we need to drive more abilities and awareness in space. And so from Scout's perspective, we want to put as many eyes on as many different spacecraft as possible to be as bus agnostic as possible. And there are far more commercial spacecraft than there are or ever will be governmental. And so that's the vein we look at the commercial market through. Like, it is currently an enabler for more governmental needs, but it is foundational to what we will need to be doing collectively as a civilization to expand safe space operations and for just commercial capabilities to proliferate.
Thank you. Now I'm going to get into commercial SSA with some questions. I will preface by saying, before I came to aerospace, I worked at Maui for a large prime contractor that ran the Amos Observatory. So I was at the pointy end of the telescope. But while I was there, I stood up within that company with some colleagues a commercial SSA. We purchased data, we provided services to customers, and then and that was sort of it. So that's one model, but that's not the only model. So I want to ask the panelists where you see things going. Is it technologies that are going to be important in the marketplace? Is it commercial services? Is it data? Let's hear your thoughts. Thank you. Christine? Being a purchaser of these things.
So at least from Office of Space Commerce, as we're building our civil SSA capability, we want to leverage all of that. whether it's software services that are commercially available specific to SSA around how do you do screenings, or how do you look at the quality of the data, how do you reduce the uncertainty around where the objects are, to data itself that comes from a variety of different sensing networks. Right now, in terms of whether it's at LEO or GEO, as we build up the system, we're going to be procuring all these types of things. But as we build it, we're building it only to the level of safety, because that's part of our mission for spaceflight safety, space sustainability, and international coordination for the traffic coordination system for space, or TRACS. So that's the level that we're building towards. The rest of it, though, we want to leave to the commercial marketplace to build those advanced services that we don't want to get in the way of whatever services are needed for business optimization, or extending fleet lifetimes, for example. That's for the commercial marketplace. We're just focused on spaceflight safety, but leveraging commercial capabilities to be able to deliver that.
But perhaps you have no plans to purchase technology. Commerce is not going to have their own sensor network or anything like that.
No, we are not planning right now to be building our own sensor network or anything like that.
Eve?
Well, that's great, because we are. And so at True Anomaly, right, we have our software for SDA applications. We also have satellites we're designing and deploying called Jackals, and we are trying to use those to offer a very specific set of SDA data. So there's very few spacecraft in orbit right now that are maneuverable between orbits, used for non-Earth imaging, and have a full array sensor suite. So I've seen what non-Earth imaging satellites can do, and the images they're able to capture from hundreds of kilometers away are just an incredible technological feat. But as far as SDA, I don't really feel like they're able to paint the full picture of what the capabilities of the spacecraft they're imaging would be. So that's why we want to deploy our Jackals to go collect that data, go perform rendezvous and proximity operations with those satellites in order to create high-resolution imagery of all 6 sides of the satellite, as well as infrared data, in order to better understand the capabilities of said satellites. And I think that's like the real market, is selling that data and giving it to other people to leverage for strategic planning or mission coordination. But also, as far as the hardware goes, I think, as they mentioned, Starfish mentioned in the first panel, like, it's this hardware as a service. So we're not just going to be selling our satellites to the Space Force or commercial buyers. It's, what do you need us to do? We will perform the mission end to end. So I think it's trying to target both of those markets at the same time.
Okay. There's another space-based SSA company that's not represented today. They recently launched some satellites, but I ran into them at the National Geospatial Agency. There was an SSA conference, a day-long conference there, and I was kind of surprised about that. And in discussions with them, I found that it's their consideration that purely space-based SSA, there's not enough there. They need to also look down and not just across and up. Does that jive with your business plans as well, or?
And look down, do you mean Earth imaging, or do you just mean?
Yeah.
Well, I do think right now the market for Earth imaging is much larger than non-Earth imaging, but I think SDA is crucial for maintaining United States space superiority for strategic deterrence. So I think we need to start investing more in SDA so we can understand the capabilities that exist right now in space.
Yeah. But satellites are expensive, right?
Yeah, but they're getting cheaper every day, a little bit.
Telescopes are very cheap. Okay. Eric, on to you. Same question.
You calling me cheap? So
No.
I think per your question, all of those are a means to an end. And the real thing is, like, knowledge is power, knowledge de-risks, and knowledge is deterrent. And what all of those things, be it hardware, software, data, sales, all of that goes towards providing the information and answers necessary to end users that they need to safely perform their operations. And so at the end of the day, that's what we're looking at. And there was a few other questions you sprinkled on there. I think there's a lot of space to look at, and that's why I think the market can support several SSA companies. And we personally are not looking down. Specifically have not even applied for a license for it. We want to look up and sideways. And being that, and I'm going to throw an answer to your following questions, we are specifically a payload capability. And so because we are as bus agnostic as possible, we can supplement other missions going up. We just announced our OWL payloads yesterday, which are independently gimbaling, long-range, non-resolved imaging SDA capabilities that can be bolted onto other spacecraft and without affecting the primary mission of our host, independently articulate and perform observations. And so stuff like that de-risks all of the efforts to get it into space and also lowers the cost for us because we're able to be on different platforms and different locations and still provide valuable service and capability to customers.
So is the OWL, that's an attached payload, is that just you're along for the ride, or is that part of that spacecraft's well-being, if you would?
It depends on the relationship we have with the host. We're kind of all of the above right now. So if the host has a need for taskable vision capabilities on board, we can arrange utility of that by the host. And it can go all the way to just us being purely a ride share and operating essentially independently of the host, or being way more integrated, providing like GNC outputs and things like that. And for our smaller payloads, they are more dedicated purely for prox ops and relative navigation and things like that. So that is way more directly tied into like the host's ADAC system and onboard computer and things like that.
Thank you. Let's shift gears a little bit and let's zero in on TRAX. Obviously, TRAX is an outgrowth of SDA or SSA, but how does it fit in? Tell us about the TRAX opportunity. Why now? What do you think? Where do you think TRAX is going in the next few years? Christine, this is for you.
Sure. So for those who may be confused, again, why is Department of Commerce building a civil SSA system? So for years, Department of Defense, through the Space Delta II, or the 18th Space Defense Squadron, has been giving out space situational awareness and space traffic coordination information to the world, basically. It turns out that missile defense sensors are also really good at seeing satellites. And so they've been putting out the unclassified information, making that available if you're a satellite operator for years. However, with the growth of commercial space activity in particular, this has really gone beyond their national security mission. So through various policy and legislative actions, that responsibility for providing SSA to civil and commercial entities was directed to be transferred to the Department of Commerce. And in 2023, we actually received a big expansion in funding to be able to really take on this mission. And that has led to the development of TRAX, the Traffic Coordination System for Space. So we're taking a very phased development approach to work with the Department of Defense in building up this system. TRAX is going to be a modern IT cloud-based system to pull in both the unclassified data from the Department of Defense, commercial SSA data and sources to provide basic SSA and STC safety services publicly, free of charge. But we're only providing it up to the level needed for safety. We're also going to be supporting research and development, working with NASA on what that portfolio will look like. And we're right now planning for phase 1.0 to be launched in October 2024. So starting very small with a beta set of users as we're building up capabilities. And working with the Department of Defense to make sure that we're not disrupting spaceflight safety services as well. As this develops, as we grow, all commercial and private satellite operators, TRAX will be the conduit for spaceflight safety services when it comes to SSA and STC. And it's also going to be the conduit in terms of how can we promote a sustainable space environment so that it can be continued to be used for science, R&D, and commercial activity, and also for international coordination, because we're not operating in a vacuum, and other countries are operating in space as well. So how can we coordinate to make sure there are no collisions, which impacts everyone's environment?
So if the audience member was interested in finding more about TRAX, are there resources available?
Yes, we have. If you just look up the Office of Space Commerce, there's a tab now for TRAX/SSA. It has an info page. There's a 40-minute video we put out in last July with Dr. Sandy Magnus, who's currently the chief engineer for the TRAX program, laying out the architecture and planning for how we're going to be rolling out the system. That's also where we're announcing how to engage with us, whether it's through public listening sessions to where we want feedback from you all, whether it's the community, satellite operator communities on specific technical issues so that we can put that feedback into the development of the system. Again, we're doing this in an agile way so that we can both evolve to the needs of the commercial space industry and as that grows and evolves over time. And that's also where you'll see a lot of news announcements. We're very active on LinkedIn now, especially around kind of our Pathfinder projects, which are smaller projects with commercial SSA companies to dive into specific technical issues. How do we acquire SSA data and services in particular ways so that we can build a sustainable program going forward. I'd always heard that acquisitions are very difficult to figure out in government, now living that experience, but the Pathfinder projects also allow us to explore both technical metrics and how to acquire data and services into a system that integrates multiple commercial companies' capabilities together.
I've maintained for many years that Air Force acquisition is a DARPA hard problem. I have not been dissuaded from that perspective. Let's shift gears again. Let's talk about something maybe a little contentious sometimes, data sharing. So SSA data collected by private entities may be treated as IP by the firms, and they could be harmed by its release. We have to remember that it's commercial SSA, not charitable SSA. There's always a lot of people want data. They want you to give them the data for free, and that's just not tenable a lot of times. Also, on the government side, sometimes there's national security aspects tied up in the data, sensor locations, sensor performance, those sorts of things. So it's very difficult to do that, but it's important. So I would like your opinion how we overcome some of these challenges and allow sharing to happen. For example, what do you think could be shared, and how can we share that in a way that maintains intellectual property, national security, but allows data to be free, so to speak, in that regard, not necessarily without cost. So let's start with Christine.
So when it comes to particularly data sharing for commercial SSA companies, we're the Department of Commerce. One of our objectives with TRACS is to also foster the commercial marketplace. So that we're still in the process in terms of understanding, as we're working with companies, what those data rights will look at, but it's definitely an issue that we're looking into as we're building out the system. In terms of the kind of operations or national security concerns, one of the working groups that we have with the Department of Defense is specifically on data exchange, the unclassified data we're receiving from them, and going back and what they're going to be pulling from the TRACS system, and that went through a lengthy process to figure out what can and cannot be shared. Hoping to give more news about that soon.
Well, at True Anomaly, I think we would be more hoping to, take all that SSA data for free and feed it into our systems to merge with classified data in order to give, theoretically Space Force operators as clear as an operational picture as possible. So I think we wouldn't necessarily be contributing to it. However, I do think coming from the SDA side of things, I was only going to say I think it's so crucial that we really think long and hard about what should be made public or what shouldn't be. And I think as far as SSA, knowing where everything is and where it's going, that should be made as public as possible. But as far as capabilities go, I think that needs to be thought long and hard about as to what the process should be to making sure that's compartmentalized appropriately. And it sounds like you guys are doing that appropriately, so that's great.
As just a point of reference, TRACS made a decision a long time ago to be completely unclassified. Mm-hmm. That being said, there are still OPSEC concerns that people have to worry about. But I think you and Eric will find that TRACS, especially a part of TRACS called TRACS Horizon, mm-hmm. is a place to come and find data that will be available, and sometimes not data, it's results. Mm-hmm. It's a process chain, so it might be conjunction data messages or something like that will be more available to be able to help industry provide advanced services that aren't free of user fee. I don't want to say free because somebody's paying for them, U.S. taxpayer. So will that be helpful to you, Eve?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one point is really crucial is not only what everything is, but also what you're saying, the analysis, warnings, collision avoidance, all that is going to be really crucial. So I'm definitely looking forward to all the progress in the horizon and the next things to come for tracks.
Eric, how does all this fit in with what Scout's doing?
Yeah, I mean, considering we are primarily a data collector and distributor, I think it's important to us. The results from tracks might be free, but the data going into it can't be, and government will be a customer of this. And so, to that point, hopefully it is economically feasible for the data providers to provide it in a way that is useful to the government. And in terms of what we would provide them, it's what is the minimum you need to do your job? What is how raw of data do you need, or how processed of data do you need? And it would be delivered to them as needed for them to do their job, and nothing more, and probably nothing less. And then, we would have to work on data rights agreements, like how much of that raw data or means of how the data is collected and where and all of that is or is not provided to the end users. All of that comes into play in how we would interact with that system. So, it's kind of a non-answer, but I can summarize it as TBD.
Do you see Scout's main business model being something that can support tracks, or are you mainly going to be playing in the more defense arena of SDA kind of thing? Is that?
We're leaning currently more towards the SDA side. It is a more mature market with more defined end goals and uses and current needs. As much as we can be applicable and usable by space traffic coordination systems or anything else that can utilize our data, we want to be a part of. I'm, very supportive of, Tracks and Office of Space Commerce's mission. And if we are able to help them succeed at their job, then, happy to be a part of it.
Okay. My next question is going to be about sort of how do we know what we know? So we've got, and I'm going to start with Eve, and I'm going to start with Eric, and then Eve, and then we'll go to Christine this time. You're going to make measurements of objects in space. They're far away. How do we gain confidence that we have the right answer, that your data are good, the results are good? What is your philosophy for collecting data and verifying what you have is something that is correct, verifiable, and accurate?
I have a whole set of magic 8 balls on my desk, and I shake them vigorously. No, we have processes for that, and I feel like I would have to have like a GNC engineer with me to actually explain what those are. Well, I guess one that actually works for Scout, because another GNC engineer. We have processes that we go through to try to determine the accuracy and validity of our data. We have methods we test with real data and synthetic data to kind of confirm or deny where we're at. And we have various calibrations we do of our vision systems upon deployment and at different intervals and things like that. So our customers need to be able to trust us with the information we're giving them, and so we have to make sure we trust ourselves. And so, this is all very important in our development and the things we do to ensure that we are doing what we say we're doing. And so, also still in development, always trying to add more layers to this, more assurances as we grow and as we learn and as we develop. But it is something that's definitely top of mind.
Eve is a GNC engineer. You can now answer the question.
I was going to start by answering this question saying, as a GNC engineer, I think there's definitely standard methodologies of doing this. There are astrodynamic standards put forward by AIAA. There's all sorts of algorithms you can use to try to validate your measurements and understand your uncertainty. But I guess I kind of interpreted this as that's not really the point of the question. I think it's more about working together and trying to figure out the best way to do it moving forward, in a collaborative way. And so, something really similar, relevant to this just happened when we launched 2 of our satellites on the Transporter 10 rideshare mission. And when that happens, it's so easy to get lost as to whose satellite is who and which trajectories is whose. And The way I saw these SSA and non-SSA companies come together in order to coordinate that was just so inspiring. And we all know that space is such a collaborative industry and that the people in it are super generous. So I feel like from that experience, I just feel like moving forward, we're going to be able to figure out a way to all share our data and make sure it's accurate and validate it. So I'm very optimistic for moving forward.
Are there standards that you use, observational standards, NIST standards?
Yeah, we mostly try to use the astrodynamics ones from AIAA, or we try to validate versus the Omicron database. That's a little bit more on the mission operations side of things than just our guidance, navigation, and control. But as said, like there are processes set up for this that are based in fundamentals.
So Christine, Trax is obviously going to be acquiring a lot of commercial SSA data and services. What is their thoughts on how to filter for quality, how to make sure that they're not polluting, so to speak, the answer? How's that going to work out?
So one of the services, it's more going to be internal to Trax. It won't necessarily be seen by the end users, but is around both data integrity monitoring and data quality monitoring. So can you do like basic like data checks, and then and verification and validation, and then data quality monitoring involves like looking in hindsight. Are there changes in the data provider's data that's coming in? How do we develop metrics around this? That's actually part of one of the Pathfinder projects that we recently kicked off called the Consolidated Pathfinder, focused on the LEO regime, looking at additional tasking for secondary objects where can you task a commercial sensor to get additional data and improve the quality of the conjunction assessment screening, looking at the ability of these commercial companies to build up a commercial catalog for a subset of LEO objects. And then also we brought on 2 companies to do data quality monitoring services as well as part of this Pathfinder project. And through that, we're looking at developing metrics to what this service will look like. I think just even from what Eric and Eve have already talked about, these services exist. We're working on building up the metrics and how can we actually integrate it into an overall system.
Let's since this is a sort of a market-based kind of conference, let's talk about the market. Let's talk about what do you think. This is more for Eve and Eric. We'll start with Eve. What is the market for space-based surveillance, and specifically, because you can do that with ground-based radars, ground-based optical, but you've chosen space-based optical, I'm assuming. Mm-hmm. What is your thoughts on one, the market in general for SSA data and services, but specifically also how the space-based part fits into that?
Yeah, so as far as the market, I feel like we're really focused on is United States DoD. The U.S. Space Force has a budget of, I think, $30 billion, and it's hoping to increase every single year. But besides that, I feel like every single branch of the DoD ties into space. Like I said, so many different parts of our life are so reliant on space. I feel like there's a huge market for that. And so True Anomaly, we've already won a few contracts from the Space Force for SDA specifically in creating a whole software platform in order for mission planning and battle management tactics and training for Space Force operators. So that's kind of what we're pursuing. But like I said, I do think there's a huge, nascent commercial market where anyone who wants more eyes in space. Like I think that's fundamentally what we need is more eyes. Like I said, with like these transporter missions where there's a lot of satellites all being released at once and everyone's confused. Imagine if we could augment the data you're getting from your launch provider with a satellite coming up and actually observing the deployment of all these satellites. I feel like that kind of data could be crucial for understanding the health and wellness of your satellite upon deployment. So I see a lot of different use cases for commercial, and I'm just hoping that we can get there sooner rather than later and not be fully reliant on DoD funding for the indefinite future, of course.
So a dozen-ish years ago, a colleague of mine was trying to come up with let's call it just a GEODS replacement. He had some interesting technology that he wanted to deploy around the world and do the job that GEODS does now, which is the geo, the optical, and some of the other things that they do. He ran into an issue is that the DoD had no way to buy his services. Are you running into any issues with what you want to sell? They don't know how to buy it? Is that just to put it plainly?
I think everyone that's trying to win contracts from the DoD understands there's always going to be some difficulties that come along with that. And there's definitely big hurdles to cross. You need to prove your experience and your capabilities before they'll even consider taking that risk on you. But I think it's going to become more and more apparent that we'll hopefully be able to move much faster than these existing systems. At True Anomaly, we look at something like the GSAP system, which is the geospatial space surveillance system up in GEO, and that's it does incredible work and is continuing to be expanded upon, and more satellites are being deployed. But those satellites are so exquisite and they're so fuel limited that mission operators need to think months or years ahead whenever they want to plan a mission or maneuver. So that's why we want to create a more proliferated system in order to tactically be responsive to threats on orbit. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to make headway with winning government contracts more and more in the future, of course.
Eric, your turn.
I will preface with, I think ground-based SDA is extremely important, and we work in concert with them and have some partners in that field, and it's a great tip and cue framework. I will also state that the Earth is 76% ocean, and it's going to be very difficult to have continuous coverage of all of space using terrestrially based sensors. Additionally, if you want to see something from multiple angles simultaneously to get different kinds of data other than position, that is extremely difficult to do from the Earth's surface. At the end of the day, I think one of the things that is the main selling point of space-based sensing is continuous custody. If you're able to monitor a specific asset throughout its entire revolution around the planet without losing sight of it, that is the holy grail for defense-related applications. And it is, well, it's probably not, it's probably a holy-ish grail. I think as we're able to proliferate these systems, these less exquisite systems in different orbits, in different kinds of positions, and on different ConOps that come with them, you're able to help complete that picture that is not completely doable from ground-based SDA.
So, but about the market, is your current client set is currently DoD, I'm guessing. Do you see it as a big market? Is it growing? Is it big enough for you? Can Scout grow as you want Scout to grow? Do you need to move into adjacent markets like the commercial or international?
Yeah, so we are predominantly government customer right now. So almost entirely by dollar amount, US DoD. But the commercial side is always a part of our business. It will grow. It is necessary. Again, as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, we need those commercial buses in order to get our assets out there to perform these services for the government customers. And so the commercial side is already tied in, whether or not they are a driving monetary customer at this point or not. So I will say a certain part of our BD efforts go towards the commercial side, but nearly the entirety of our revenue generation is on the government side. And those numbers are going up. I mean, every new report that comes out from Space Force or the White House National Space Council is always, more things related to in-space knowledge and space domain awareness and things like that. Every priority thing that comes out, space domain awareness is is closer and closer to the top, and there's more sub-bullets that relate to it, and the budgets are going up, and people are realizing the importance of knowledge as a deterrent. And so the trend is going in the right direction, and it's a matter of not just producing things to produce them, but to develop products that provide the answers the end users and the customers are looking for, and making sure that the widget or thing or product you're developing is tailoring to the market that is here now, but able to expand to the market that will be 10 years from now.
Any thoughts about providing for international governments like Five Eyes or something like that? Is that part of the future for you?
Yes. The short answer is yes. There's a much longer answer we could talk about off stage.
So we're at a point, we have some time left, but I wanted to open it up to audience questions. I don't want to just dominate all this. So there are microphones, as I know. Please stand up, raise your hand.
I was mentioning at the beginning we should have brought our Eclipse glasses.
And please introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, my name is Helena. This is a question for Eric. You just mentioned something about how the Earth is 70% ocean, and it would be very difficult to, I think you said, detect satellites from only terrestrial land, and I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so if you have a radar ground station looking up, you have a swath of the sky you can see. And those, I have no idea where you are, so I'm just looking arbitrarily. And you can't place these radar ground stations everywhere. And you certainly can't place them in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And so you will be constrained to some degree by what part of the sky you can actually see. And it is very difficult, probably not impossible, but very difficult to eventually get complete coverage of the sky at all times. Also, you have to deal with things like weather and other Earth-based things that happen, earthquakes and storms and things that are not necessarily applicable in space. And so I think you also get to a point of resolution of those systems that is at some point not usable as the density of traffic overhead increases, as the complexity of their movements and operations increase. You're going to need additional data sources to supplement, complement, or maybe even replace those ground-based systems.
I'll just add that radar has the advantage of being, all weather, day and night. Doesn't care if the sun is up or not, but it's you're sending energy up and allowing it to bounce off something and then collecting it as it comes back down. So you've got a 1/r⁴ kind of loss. So that sort of, it does limit how high you can go. So LEO Labs is named very, specifically because they just do LEO, they don't do GEO. Obviously, Lincoln Labs, the RAD lab here, they have techniques to be able to do things that GEO. Obviously, we see the moon with radar and things like that, but it's expensive and it's not necessarily part of a commercial product, just to help you out with that. That's why we go with optical, because the sun is free, it bounces off, and you just collect the photons in a traditional astronomy kind of sense. Are there additional questions? Don't be shy. There's a question over here. Question over here. I saw that hand first.
Don't know how.
Yeah, no,
It's me again. I'm actually realizing I'd also like to hear Christine's thoughts on this as well, but we can also move on to a different topic. Whatever you think is appropriate.
So I guess just really briefly, I would agree with Eric in terms of that's why, at least from the TRACS perspective, we're trying to get a diverse set of commercial data sources, like both the unclassified data from DoD to build up tracks, and then diverse different types of commercial data and analytics and software services as well, both in terms of resiliency for the track system and to foster a competitive marketplace as well. I think I saw a question in the middle.
Yeah, there's a question over here.
Oh, yeah. Hi, I'm Max. I've got a question for Eve about, so True Anomaly is working on, you mentioned space domain awareness, but also space situational awareness. I was wondering what your opinion is on kind of the value of those two different types of data. Do you think in the future more specific space domain awareness data will be everywhere or more common, or is it going to be reserved only for governments?
Well, great question. SSA and SDA obviously have a big overlap and I think play together to ensure safety and security in space. But I do think SDA is becoming more and more relevant. Like, as we move forward and the space domain becomes more congested and contested, I think it's really important, like Eric was saying, like knowledge is power. So, there's a lot of different people in space, countries, commercial entities, and I feel like we all need to be using space responsibly. So if a threat was launched into space, for example, the United States currently has no capability to quickly go perform RPO, rendezvous with it, create high resolution industry to get meaningful insights into what the capabilities of that spacecraft would be. So I see a huge importance for SDA, but SSA is going to be crucial because we're launching more and more every day, and I think that's why systems like TRACS are so important, because we need to scale our data capabilities with the same rate that we're scaling objects in space.
Got it. Thank you.
Additional questions?
There we are. Hello, I am Alex. I'm a voice from the darkness because I know you can't see me, but that's okay. I have a question I have a question on behalf of someone else, actually. So a family member of mine is a director of a space science institute at a different college, and he's brand new in the position, and he has a background in gravitational wave astronomy, which has very abstracted away from space commercialization. But one thing that he so happens is trying to do is to figure out how he can adjust coursework in order to actually have a track for students who are interested in all aspects of space commercialization. So I was curious for anyone here at the board, not obviously there's the science, engineering, and also the business aspects of space commercialization. Is there any particular skills, courses, anything that might help someone in that position kind of build out a program that can get students not only interested in the space industry, but also help them be really successful?
Well, as a former president of the Space Industry Club at Sloan, I do think understanding the business case is super important. I'm an engineer, but I think a lot of really incredible minds are out there, and they don't even understand that you don't need to be an astrodynamicist to go into the space industry. So opening that up, making it seem more accessible, and offering more diverse coursework, as you were saying, is really important. Things like the economics at space that they're teaching at HBS. Professor Weinzierl, I believe, is here. All were super fascinating, and it was so cool to see people from all industries want to come in and hear what new commercial space is doing, as well as existing space companies.
So I will just add that Ray Weiss was my undergraduate advisor. He was the PI of LIGO, and he later on won some prize for that, something like that. I would suggest, though, a classmate of mine was a fellow named Peter Diamandis, and he was one of the founders of something called the International Space University. You might look at their curriculum. They do have master's degrees, and they have professional programs, and they have elements of what they need to teach people that aren't necessarily astrophysicists or astrodynamicists to learn about space. So that might be a good place for your family member to start to kind of get an idea about what makes sense to take people that are lawyers or mechanical engineers that don't know about space but are interested. So in the remaining 30 seconds...
Can I jump in on
Yes, just please.
Okay, I'll speak as slowly as possible. So I'm actually speaking on a panel about this to Virginia Tech place at the end of the month. And one thing I talk about is I started a SEDS chapter, another useful student organization, at my undergrad institution, and we were all physicists and nerds and stuff. The most useful person in the chapter was the one graphic design major, because he made all our posters, he made our logo, he made everything that brought in everybody else. And so, that's a story I like to tell. But for academic stuff, do more project-based things, and do more project-based things that incorporate other majors. So have a satellite project. I mean, it can be real or fake or whatever, but have it well-rounded. Have engineers, have engineering team, have the business side, have a legal student, have everyone, and work towards a common goal of making that thing real, making it viable in business, and then have each of them present on their sliver of how that came to be. And so the more experiential things you can do, and also I'm probably a harsh critic of academia in general, so I have a lot of opinions on that. But the more project-based things you can do in hands-on development and experiential things, I think that is the most useful aspect that is usable to companies as you're coming right out of school.
Yeah. Let me just quickly summarize what I think the takeaways are from this panel. One is that space situational awareness is foundational to space traffic coordination, space traffic management, and space domain awareness. So it's all about making measurements and doing the processing and getting answers, if you would. I think the second thing that I'd like the audience to take away is that, like a lot of things in space, they start off as all government, but then then they move to government plus contractors, and they move to more of a commercial thing. So we're seeing, like we saw in the launch industry, like we saw in the satellite building industry, now we're seeing in the SSA industry, where what used to be the domain of the Space Surveillance Network and live in a vault, in a cave, is now being opened up, and there are business-to-business opportunities in addition to business-to-government opportunities. So with that, I'd like to thank our panel. And I think it's time for lunch.
Oh, awesome. Thanks so much to our great panel. It was a fantastic panel. Thanks so much for all the insights you had today. It's lunchtime, which is awesome. We'll be back here at 1 for our next panel. So feel free to go ahead, get lunch, socialize, and we'll be back here at 1. Thanks, everyone.